If you're built like the average lifter yet want to deadlift 500 to 600 pounds naturally, then listen to my advice, because you're looking at someone who did it while having a bencher's build. Out of the big three, the deadlift is the one lift that I've struggled with the most for years at a time. Horrible recovery, slower progress, yet you see the gains. So I'm going to be sharing my key programming lessons that I know for an absolute fact for anyone who isn't built like an orangutan will be a life changer. More muscle gains with less injuries. Let's get into it. First, I want to talk about the concept of your active hinging range. See, pulling from the floor, also called a conventional deadlift, or sumo if that's your preference, is entirely determined by the size of the Olympic plates, which were determined decades ago for the sport of Olympic lifting as to not decapitate yourself. Because if you're doing cleans and snatches, you drop it down or you fail the rep, last thing you want to do is get caught under in your neck area. So that is precisely, it is the only reason why we have these specs to begin with, yet powerlifting, strongman, all these sports decide to take that one measurement and say, yeah, that's the position that every lifter on planet Earth should use to pull from the floor. That is full range of motion. Not understanding the fact that if you use slightly smaller plates, aka a deficit deadlift, there's more ROM and everyone could do it. Yeah, why is that not the competitive standard? Well, because it's all arbitrary. So once you comprehend the fact that everyone can technically pull with 25-pound plates, or at least stand on some mats, then it finally allows you to question the concept of allocating most of your work towards pulling from the floor, particularly if you're not built to do that. See, there's a very easy test. You stand up, bend your knees ever so slightly, and bring that towards the wall right behind you. See how low you can go. Now, depending on your torso, arm, and leg length, the degree to which you bend forward will differ. And it's never going to be the same for every lifter. So guys who are built to pull are going to be more upright. T-Rex guys like myself are going to be bent forward like a Pendlay row. And then you got your in-between. So assuming you're that in-between guy, you're not the blessed dude, then really doing tons of conventional deadlifts because that's the right way. It's the only way. It is the strength training way. Is caveman-like thinking. That said, even though the pulling starting position will be around mid-shin, it's still possible for everyone to get super strong because the posterior chain is still what's moving the load, right? And the reality is, by you getting extra degrees lower, that just requires more erector spining, as well as some quads, hence leg drive. Obviously, pulling from the floor is not a 100% pure hinge. The simultaneous bending of the knees while leaning forward is what gives you more range of motion, but it's not that significant, and you're not going to be limited in that department strength-wise unless your squat is absurdly weak or you just have this crazy quad weakness, but it's unlikely unless it's a trap bar deadlift, which is in fact more quaddy, though funny enough, is less quaddy than the sumo deadlift, but I won't go there for today. The discussion is all about the straight bar, right? So as that bar lowers past your active hinging range, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what the real weak link in the chain is. Your lower back recovery is limited. I've always said it is a precious resource. In my experience, I have tried for years and years and years, experimenting with all kinds of waving and form techniques. It is not possible for me to do tons of volume when pulling from the floor. I cannot do it. It feels like my spine is gonna break. Even though I have reverse hyper, I do tons of traction work, I'm always rotating variations. Even though I've done everything in my power, and my spinal erectors are massive. They are thick, they are strong. If I do more than about 4 sets, even with lower repetitions where fatigue is gonna be lower, I start to hurt in ways that aren't productive for gains. And that's how it is for guys who aren't built to deadlift. From a proximity to failure standpoint, we're getting more workload allocated towards the lower back. And so there's really 2 solutions. One is to get your lower back so freaking strong that you can muster through anything, and that's always gonna be the first line of defense. Always address your weak links. That's an instant route to carry over. But the second thing is going to be reducing the amount of frequency of pulling from the floor and favoring variations that are slightly elevated. Because remember, you're still in your active hinging range for the glutes and hamstrings. As I told you earlier, as I proved to you that the Olympic plates standards are arbitrary, that you're not loading your big plump by going further. That's your lower back. If you're doing a below the knee rack slash strap pull, which will not bend your bar, or a block pull in which the plates are elevated by around this much, 2 to 4 inches tops. I don't want to see 6 inches. I don't want to see anything high. No, slight elevation to enter your active hinging range. You favor that, and I promise you, it's an instant fix and it's a long-term fix that you will be able to handle traditional sets and reps, traditional pulling volume, just like your taller counterparts. You can all do this. So that's the freaking solution. You still do full range of motion pulls from the ground, but you don't go crazy with it. You cap your weights at 90%. You don't go above, because when you have form breakdown, that's a one-way ticket to Snap City. Your tolerance for lower back rounding are far less, and you're more prone to overuse. So even the RPE's gotta be dialed back. Like, I don't wanna see crazy grinders on deadlifts. You're not gonna see me do it if I'm doing conventional off the ground. You can grind on other hip hinges, but not when your lower back has literally hit failure, yet the other muscles haven't. Because now you're gonna have an ugly pull, you're reinforcing a proper technique, and you're bound to get hurt at some point. And so, one step back, that's all you gotta do. From a strength training standpoint, there doesn't appear to be a big difference, so that's the beautiful thing in all this. Like, if you're lifting in the RPE 8 zone even, like, that is beautiful. And then from a percentage standpoint, the majority of your work should be in the 70 to 80% zone, not 85, which is what you see in many powerlifting programs. When you have disadvantaged leverages, you want to dial back the percentages by 5 to 10%, and in extreme cases, even 15%. You can have a guy at the same percentage of the 1 rep max that have completely different rep counts. And for the T-Rex crew, the lower the better. But the thing is, I still want you sticking to lower reps. So you're really embracing reps in reserve here, right? And the reason is, when you do high rep, dead stop hip hinges, which is what a deadlift is, it's very easy for form to degrade because fatigue kicks in. You start to get a serious lower back pump. And because the deadlift is rather technical, especially for us, you'll find that sticking to traditional hypertrophy rep ranges, even though when you go to failure, everything's gonna be equated, it's not equated from a technique standpoint. So I like reps of 5 to 8. Anything beyond that point is playing with fire. Not saying it can't be done, but you're better off reserving that for the hip hinges that have a better stimulus fatigue ratio, which I'll get to in a moment. But just to add more information on deadlifting heavy, if you plan on using the max effort method, I wouldn't do so more than once or twice a month tops. The squats should be favored even if you're trying to specialize in the dead, just because it's easier on recovery. So you need to have a 2 to 1 ratio or 3 to 1. And in my personal experience, I got the best results ever with a 3 to 1 ratio. That means if I'm maxing out 4 times a month on the lower body, only 1 time will be a deadlift. And the variation will be rotated every single time to further bulletproof. And keep in mind, this is only the introduction to the workout. You still have to hit your back off sets right after. Or you can scrap the singles altogether, just go into it. But that's what your primary deadlift volume looks like. And within it, there needs to be a blending component within the week. What I mean is, if you train your legs twice a week or you have 2 deadlift days, the first workout should consist of pulls from the floor, and your second workout, pulls in the rack or blocks with slightly more volume, since you can literally tolerate it, which doesn't have to be more than 1 or 2 sets extra. And to be perfectly honest, you don't even have to do this to begin with. If you want to equalize it, same volume on both days, fine. The overloading factor already gives you a decent workload for the muscles that control hip extension. All I want you doing is getting that stimulus in with enough volume to drive progress without your lower back recovery being an issue, which absolutely will be problematic if using the same deadlift variation and volume on both days. So like, what I would actually do is 2 sets on the Tuesday and then 3 sets on the Friday. And the Friday would be a rack pull. And I favor straps just because I'm lazy. I don't feel like setting up blocks. This is a softer touch and I enjoy it. I find the carryover benefits are close enough. Now you can argue that the blocks are slightly better, and I would 100% agree with you on that. But I'm not a powerlifter. But if you are, fine. You do what you gotta do, okay? All right, I want you pulling from here and here within the same week. In a perfect world, I would tell you to only do it from the ground, but that's not reality. And then one more thing I'll mention about blending. I don't train this way, but I have heard this from other T-Rex pullers, is to do the reverse of your squat and dead in the same workout intensity-wise. What I mean is, if you start your workout with a heavy squat, then you don't want to follow it up with a heavy deadlift. Likewise, on the secondary lower body day, you do a light squat and a heavy deadlift. Always opposite, because those are two competition movements that allow you to move big weights. Like, yeah, the squat's easier on recovery, but there might be, what, 100-pound gap between the two? Like, there's still a lot of axial loading, bracing, coordination, 100% central fatigue. Therefore, you don't want to double down by going heavy on both. I suppose the only thing we could double down on is going light on both, but then that would be less effective for strength training purposes. Next, if you want to get even more volume in, or in general, you're not a fan of doing it through dead stop variations, then my absolute best recommendation, which is also number one for hypertrophy, is favoring Romanian deadlifts and good mornings. And personally, that's how I got really strong in the last 2 years. I would do max effort deadlifts, so just heavy singles, but then my rep work, which would be in the 8 to 12 rep range, sometimes 15 to 20 if it was a volume day, was always on those two exercises, and primarily good mornings. Like 7 out of 10 times, that's what it was. And for one reason only: stimulus to fatigue. Now, I'm basically a broken record at this point, so I would say it's mandatory that you watch this video on RDLs versus good mornings. Also, this one on good mornings not being glutes, which a lot of biomechanics fraudsters are now claiming. But to be brief here, you can pick any of the two. I don't give a which you select. They're both S tier exercises, and it's going to be less weight than your deadlifts or your rack pulls, which greatly lowers fatigue. This means the rest of your workout will not be compromised to the same extent. Heck, the rest of the week, you're gonna feel fine, and you can do way more sets and reps. You wanna do 5 sets of 10 good mornings twice a week? Go right ahead. You're gonna feel it less than doing 6 sets of 10 on deadlifts. Even though, from a moment on perspective, because everything is leverages here, right? Your glutes and hamstrings, and arguably even spine rectors, are gonna grow the same. It's all about mechanical tension and progressive overload, and the truth is, there's not a big difference stimulus-wise. It's just the fatigue that's going to be lower. And that's how I was able to get so strong. And why carryover took place 100% of the time, not only between RDLs and good mornings, but also the pulls from the ground. And that's why Louis Simmons, may he rest in peace, was so big on this. So check it. If you don't even want to do regular rep work on deadlifts, then just do this and you'll be fine. And what's great is, even the variations that are more lower back biased, like a reverse SSB good morning or a high bar good morning in which the torso is at parallel or beyond, it's still easier on recovery compared to conventional deadlifts and deficit deadlifts, even if the torso angle is similar, if not lower, because the absolute loads is an independent recovery stressor. So if I know I have a weakness in that low position, I can still train it, get those specific joint angles in, and hypertrophy those muscles, which is ultimately what matters most. If you're technically proficient at these big exercises and you get big enough and you practice some heavy work, like you have some specificity in your program, then you can acquire more strength than you'll possibly ever want. Now, am I saying this is the best way for powerlifters to work out? No. That's why I gave you my other recommendations before. A bit more specificity, which is primarily going to be dead stop pulling. Like, that's where the majority of your volume should come from. You know, that's always going to be the best, but general strength wise, does this suffice? Can you get to a 600-pound deadlift and beyond? Yes. Plus, you can always add this in addition to your regular programming. Finally, if you still struggle in that low compromise position, then definitely consider doing pause deadlifts. Now, I used to be against these for a long time because I lacked experience and was of the opinion that it affected the movement pattern. That because you're breaking up the concentric into two parts, which I was taught to never do, then it could potentially affect explosiveness in the long run. On paper, that would make sense. We can make a purely theoretical argument that pulling from pins, isometrics, just maximally forcing, would be more specific without negatively hurting your technique, and it would enhance grindability. So that's what I said. But in the real world, what do the best deadlifters in the world incorporate? What is one of the most common accessories? Pause deadlifts. Why do they all swear by it? And how come the moment I tried them, I was like, holy, this feels fucking amazing on the lower back? Because some things you gotta get in the trenches. And this is one of them. Guys, pause deadlifts really help with that lower tightness. You're increasing time and attention for the lower back, but you're also getting more out of less weight. And it teaches you not to compromise your starting position, which a lot of us who don't have the best leverages are guilty of doing. We're gonna try to yank as explosively as possible, just get the weight from point A to B, often losing that correct hinging position. And that's why you'll see a lot of ugly form, but we cannot be tempted by that. Staying tight from start to finish is the way to long-term success. And with pause deadlifts, you're bringing the bar up about 2 inches from the ground, not right below the knee. So you see a lot of guys about 4 to 6 inches up. I don't recommend that. Keep it closer to the ground, right? You're holding it. You feel that tension in the lower back. It's a good sensation though. And then you explode from there. This also helps if you're someone who uses a lot of inertia to get you going. Anyone who does this will notice that between reps, your form looks way more similar. So it actually refines technique like no other and strengthens the range that we're most vulnerable in. Your lower back has greater fatigue resistance. Then it makes sense that when doing moderate or higher rep sets, your lower back is less likely to give out, because when we're hinging, all you're really doing is maintaining isometric tension to begin with. Like, there was never a rounding and extension element. So just by you having a time and attention component is by default going to help you in a set that lasts longer than what you're normally being prescribed. And the pause deadlifts put you in that similar time frame window, therefore being specific in that way, therefore leading to better technique as you fatigue throughout the set. You're not going to be so quick to let that lower back go and continue grinding with the other muscles, which do have more juice left. So what I'm saying is, this mentally cleans up your ego, but physiologically, you can actually feel a real difference. So be sure to include pause deadlifts at least once a week in one of your mesocycles and see how far they can take you. If they correct your problem, then great, you can scrap them out. But if you notice after following everything I mentioned today, it's still an issue, then keep them in your rotation for longer. And with that said, I think I've said enough for today. There's obviously even more stuff I can suggest, like favoring traction-based motions, reverse hypers at the end of every workout, and doing a lot of belt squats to further reduce your axial loading. But that's all supplemental. So within the poles themselves, this is what's going to make the biggest difference. And I hope that you try this advice and get a stronger deadlift without the additional mileage. So let me know how it goes. Let me know if you want more videos like this, and I'll talk to you all next time.